All right, and I'm going to admit everybody now.
Yeah, camera on nothing.
Logging in.
Anything else? Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our D&I Deep Dive, starting a second chance hiring program. I'll give it just a couple more seconds for folks to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Pooja Tripathi, and I'm Director of Workforce Initiatives at the Manufacturing Institute. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We will be recording this webinar, and we'll share a link with all registrants after the event. All participants' microphones have been muted upon entering the meeting. Please ensure that you remain on mute throughout so that we can hear our speakers. We encourage you to enable speaker view in the top right corner of your screen for best viewing during the discussion. Lastly, there is a chat feature which can be accessed from the bottom of your screen, where we encourage you to submit any questions that you have for any of our speakers today. Just a quick background, the Manufacturing Institute is the nonprofit workforce development and education affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturers. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower the manufacturing workforce of today and tomorrow through a diverse set of initiatives. The MI has partnered with Stand Together Trust since April 2021 to help manufacturers implement second chance hiring. We thank them for their continued support of our second chance work. So you may be asking why we actually got involved in second chance hiring. There are a few very important reasons. Filling the manufacturing skills gap is critical. Manufacturers will need to fill 4 million jobs by 2030, with 2.1 million of those jobs potentially going unfilled. 1 in 4 Americans currently possess a criminal record. Many in this sizable talent pool are often excluded from the workforce when they could be given a second chance and help our manufacturers fill these incredible unfilled roles. So the MI engaged in second chance hiring with 2 desired outcomes. One is to improve manufacturers' perception of second chance hiring and the opportunities that this strategy could afford them in finding committed employees. And 2, to increase partnerships between community-based organizations specializing in assisting second chance individuals connect with manufacturers looking to hire. Second chance hiring helps companies expand their talent pools, decrease turnover, stay competitive, and access incentives. It's been well documented that second chance hiring increases retention and access to a diverse talent pool. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, African Americans make up 13% of the US population, but 38% of its population in prisons and jails. In the state of Georgia, where the MI's 2022 Second Chance Hiring Employer Initiative took place, African Americans make up 31% of the resident population, but about 60% of its prison population, according to the Georgia Department of Corrections. The US Bureau of Justice Statistics says that Native Americans are incarcerated at more than double the national incarceration rate. Because the justice system disproportionately impacts people of color, second chance hiring can play an important role in your corporate DE&I strategy. Any manufacturer with a commitment to D&I can look to second chance employment as a necessary and beneficial part of their work, as well as evidence of their commitment to diversifying their workforce. Over the last 3 years, the MI has initiated 5 different pilot programs. 2 of them have been community-based, one in San Antonio and another in the Atlanta, North Georgia region. And the other 3 pilots were actually with companies that wanted to implement this as an enterprise solution. We developed our second chance hiring toolkit with the help of Envoy based on what we learned from these 5 pilots. We'll dig into that here shortly. I want to emphasize that manufacturers do not have to do this alone. There are oftentimes partners in our communities who can help connect to this talent and help manufacturers navigate second chance hiring. With the support of partners like Envoy, manufacturers, and community-based organizations that were involved in our pilots, the MI has also developed case studies, videos, and other support resources available to everyone on our website. Today, we will hear from Matt Joyce, partner with Envoy, Liana Brand, Director of Expansion Strategy with Cara Collective, and Chris Lonnie, Chief Financial Officer with Nehemiah Manufacturing Company. I'm thankful that they are willing and able to share their experience, knowledge, and insights with us on community collaboration, employer engagement and leadership, and how our toolkit can help all of you with your own second chance hiring journeys. To set the foundation before we get started, I want to review some common phrases and terms that you will hear during today's session. Fair chance and second chance are both common phrases that you'll hear used interchangeably. Ecosystem is really the local network of employers, organizers, and organizations specializing in supporting reentry and recruiting job seekers with convictions. Pilot is an employer's coordinated effort to actually implement a second chance hiring initiative or a hub organization's first efforts to mobilize employers in their area around shared second chance learning and implementation support. A community partner is an organization typically at the intersection of work readiness and reentry that partners with an employer to help meet their talent needs and address retention challenges through referrals and ongoing support curated through an ongoing feedback loop. A hub organization is really an organization that plays a central role within a local employer network that really has the ability to convene employers for that structured learning and peer-to-peer best practice sharing. Justice impacted is a job seeker impacted by the justice system, typically with a conviction or arrest record. To lead the next part of our conversation, I would like to introduce Matt Joyce. Matt is a partner at Envoy Advisory, a social impact consulting firm with a focus on implementation strategy. Envoy's Fair Chance Employment Practice partners with employers and associations to develop inclusive hiring practices to recruit and retain candidates with past convictions. Envoy supports clients, including individual companies, associations, and industry leaders, to build and grow fair chance strategies. Previous to Envoy, Matt served as Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Center for Employment Opportunities and the Executive Director of the Greenlight Fund in Philadelphia. He lives and works in Brooklyn and has been an incredible partner to us at the MI as we have built out our second chance hiring initiative. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Pooja, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very excited for this conversation. As Pooja mentioned, the Manufacturing Institute has been building a whole sort of ecosystem within the manufacturing sector around second chance employment. This is an opportunity to build upon that. And we're going to hear today from a couple of leaders who have really driven local ecosystems in their communities to engage employers in both the practices of second chance hiring, but also partnership building with organizations in their community doing reentry and workforce development. So with that in mind, I have the opportunity to shift to introduce Liana Brand. Liana is the Director of Expansion Strategy at Cara Collective. Cara is an outstanding Chicago-based organization that both is working directly with job seekers with past convictions to help them move back successfully into the workforce, but also runs social enterprises and employs those job seekers and works directly with employers in their community to figure out how they can best shift their practices to be more focused on second chance hiring. So Liana, I'm going to welcome you and love to hear about Cara's model, and then we'll get to have a little conversation and talk more about how your model works in action. Liana, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Matt. Very excited to be here for this conversation. And just to get us started, for context, as Matt mentioned, Cara sits in Chicago. So we're a workforce organization. We've been around the past 30 years. And what I'll start to share is how we've been able to partner with a few local organizations to launch a fair chance hiring cohort for employers in Chicago. So I want to stay here for a moment just to orient the group in terms of who Cara is and highlight a couple of statistics. So you heard us talk about the fact that we are working with job seekers that have had a variety of barriers. You can tell in terms of Fair Chance Talent, about half of the individuals we work with have had some kind of involvement with the criminal legal system, but our job seekers have other barriers like having or not having the opportunity to pursue higher education, whether that's high school degree, GED, or for most of our candidates also any post-secondary college. Another really important part of our model is the fact that we work very closely with employment partners. So at any given time, we have about 70 employers we're working with in our network, spanning a number of industries, including manufacturing. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So my team really uses that experience of moving those job seekers to those job opportunities and seeing all those connections to really promote inclusive employment. And when I say inclusive employment, it's really how we're thinking about how do we build on some of those traditional diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts to help employers think about how they are tapping into those communities that have been historically sidelined from the mainstream economy, and that very much includes Fair Chance Talent. So for us, we think of inclusive employment as kind of having 5 pillars or 5 ways that employers have opportunities to be more inclusive. And for the most part, you can see that really maps to the talent life cycle. So starting with sourcing, how are employers increasing access to opportunities for these talent pools? When it comes to hiring, how are you making sure that qualified job seekers are making it through your hiring process? Then when someone's on the job, looking at ways to support their success, thinking about how a job supports an employee's needs, and then hopefully their careers in the long run. And then the last piece, which we'll talk a lot more about later, is also beyond that, how employers can lift up some of their commitments, some of their actions in these areas to not only help job seekers in their own talent pipelines, but also the broader landscape. And before I move on here, something I really want to emphasize when it comes to Fair Chance Talent, oftentimes we think of those really unique barriers or needs. Specifically, I'm thinking about the background check process, and that is critically important as we think about Fair Chance Talent and becoming a Fair Chance employer. But something we see all the time is there are other barriers or other things getting in the way of Fair Chance Talent progressing through the hiring process or being successful at work. So another reason we just want to take a step back and look at all of the different moments that could influence Fair Chance Talent's success. So now I want to pivot us to our work in Fair Chance specifically. One of the ways we've been doing this in our organization is to have these employer cohorts where we are first starting with what are some of those best practices to better reach and retain justice-involved individuals, but then also thinking about if you have those best practices, well, what does that mean for your particular organization? How are you meeting your priorities and kind of matching those best practices and the opportunity to test them in your individual environment? And then lastly, the cohort model, something that's so special about it is it's not just learning from our organization, but it is the opportunity to learn from other employers in the group. And so very quickly, before we kind of dive into our conversation, just want to share the context for this cohort that we launched this year in Chicago. I think another really important part of the conversation is how do you bring in the right partners in a local environment? So you've heard me talk about CARA as a direct service organization or that primarily works with job seekers. But for this work in Chicago, we also partner very, very closely with an organization called the Corporate Coalition that is employer facing. It's one of those employer hubs. And then the Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance really is one of those bigger ecosystem player that's investing and supporting a lot of these efforts. And then the last place I just want to land before we dive in is in this first cohort, the experience we were able to create was with 8 individual members that did span a variety of industries, some regulated, some less regulated, different sizes. We had a lot of actually larger companies that were dealing with a lot of complexity because they were operating nationally or internationally. So some of them also had a wider geographic footprint. But I think what was exciting to see from that experience was all employers found an opportunity to look at what specific practices they could change to better engage fair chance talent. So happy to dig into any of this more, but on a high level, what I do want to point out is, again, these practices are happening across the talent life cycle. So that could be anywhere from just helping an employer understand what are the specific roles that might be best positioned for this talent pool. Then how do they communicate the opportunities to those individuals, and thinking about how they can communicate their background check approach transparently so that job seekers know what to expect. And then, of course, we also saw how employers were differently working with their workforce or community-based organizations to source this talent, and then also thinking about things like what are those critical supports that an organization can provide to make sure an employee is set up for success. That's a little primer of some of the work we've been doing in Chicago. I'm going to pass it back over to Pooja and Matt for the next part of our conversation.
Great, Liana, thanks. This is exciting to hear more about Kara's approach. And I'd love to jump right from what you mentioned about Kara's approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion to a little bit of what you're seeing in the cohort. And would love to hear the employers that have engaged in the Fair Chance hiring cohort. Are they coming at it from a DE&I lens, and how are they kind of connecting the dots between second chance hiring and diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Matt. As we heard from Pooja, those things are so closely connected because, unfortunately, people of color are disproportionately affected. So we've seen it kind of happen in two ways. Some organizations we have seen, this is part of their DEI strategy. They're embracing and they understand that if they are pursuing fair chance talent, that naturally they are also going to be able to engage a more diverse talent pool. And the great thing, again, as we heard earlier, is that fair chance individuals oftentimes are, we're associating them, or we're seeing higher levels of retention. They're great employees. We've also seen a second kind of strategy where I'll give an example. We've worked with a major university in Chicago, and actually their primary talent priority was local hire. So for them, they came to the cohort saying, hey, we want to be an anchor institution. We want to reach our communities better. But knowing that, they had to address that this was a barrier. They had to figure out how to think about their talent practices, because they knew they were not going to be able to reach that local candidate pool, which is also more diverse, and really thinking about how fair chance talent or how those barriers might show up in the process.
Great. And I'm curious, you've now seen over the course of a year, employers kind of go from beginning to end in their fair chance strategy. And I'd love to hear about just some of the challenges that you saw those employers face as they were trying to implement fair chance practices, and to the extent that they were able to overcome some of those barriers, what that looked like.
Yeah, and that's it's so important to be mindful of some of the things that an employer might encounter in this process. I think the first one with any big change, it's always bring in the right stakeholders. I think we've seen all these talent processes that that really you need to examine to see how they are going to impact fair chance talent. They involve a lot of different stakeholders. So it's about starting up front, figuring out who are those people and what's the right time to bring them into the process. So in our cohort, for example, a lot of our primary folks were in HR. They sat in HR, talent acquisition, but along the way, we talked about things like the background check process, and they had to think about how do we engage our colleagues in legal and risk, or in our background investigations team. How are hiring managers going to feel about reaching into these new communities, and how do we bring them along the way? So really being mindful of how do you work that into your plan of implementation was hugely critical, and also making sure we're giving them the opportunity to access information that's going to be compelling to those stakeholders. So it's one primary challenge. I would say the second thing was to my earlier point of stepping back and looking at all the different ways that an organization needs to better prepare themselves to be ready for fair chance talent. And I think a great example of that was we had an organization that actually had made a lot of changes to their background check process, which was incredible. They were kind of one of those groups that was leading the way and in a good position, but they were finding people were not making it to that stage in the process. So we were actually doing a pilot with them, and we wanted to test the efficacy of that background check process and if people were making it through. And because it was at that post-offer stage, candidates were not actually getting through to that point in time, and it actually had to do with their applicant experience. And they had this kind of more cumbersome assessment that was taking a long time. So just being really mindful of, as an organization, there may be many things you have to change in the long run, or you have an opportunity to change, but really understanding where you can start to just better move the needle to be able to better tap into this talent pool.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to wrap us with this question. Any big learnings from, particularly, regionally, Chicago has built this really robust second chance ecosystem with employers, with community-based organizations, with associations. Anything as the group on this webinar is thinking about how to do this collectively in their community? Any learnings from Chicago you can share?
Yeah, well, learnings in general, I'll share kind of two. I think the first one is mostly about on a company level sustainability. So this work can take time, depending on the size of your organization, depending on any particular nuances. So being prepared that it's going to require time to invest and learn as you're going through these changes, because I think we've seen in a lot of pilots we've done with companies that it doesn't always play out how they expected. So giving yourself the space to learn along the way, and then persist and know that that's kind of natural. That's okay. You're going to shift things. I think that was a huge learning we saw many employers face. The second thing, again, speaking to more of that ecosystem context and how do you do this as a community, is it's all about partnership. So part of that is with community-based organizations. And I think what I'll say here is every ecosystem looks different. Chicago and our kind of this community of organizations and employers, it looks different from other cities. And sometimes it's hard to navigate. So being prepared for that step in the process of getting to know the landscape, investing in the relationships. I think some of the most successful fair chance employers in our markets, we all know, they're like, yeah, you work with so-and-so, us too, because they are investing the time in building the relationships. So it's those partnerships are valuable. And then partnerships with other employers. We saw every employer had some strength that another employer could learn from. Some of it was the background check process. Some had incredible team member coaching programs. So you can really accelerate your learning when you have this community and you can see that someone else has done it before you and taking what you can learn from what they've already done.
Well, Liana, thanks so much. And I'm going to jump off on your comment that every ecosystem looks different, because I think in Chicago, we really see an ecosystem with a lot of leadership from nonprofits like Kara, from associations. I'm going to transition back to Pooja to share what it looks like where there's really an employer-driven ecosystem in Cincinnati and with the work that Nehemiah is doing. So Liana, thank you very much. And Pooja, over to you.
Thank you both so much. That was really great insight. And Liana, thank you for everything y'all are doing at Kara. It's really amazing work. I'd like to now introduce Chris Lonnie. As Matt mentioned, he's with Nehemiah Manufacturing. He's the Chief Financial Officer. Chris joined Nehemiah in January 2013 after 4 years in public accounting, as well as a brief stint in the real estate development industry. Nehemiah is a profit for a purpose company whose mission is to build brands, create jobs, and change lives through employment and whole life coaching. Founded in 2009, Nehemiah now employs over 225 FTEs in the inner city of Cincinnati. Chris's role at Nehemiah is pretty unique. He oversees several departments, most importantly, the social service department, which is entrusted to help remove barriers that Nehemiah's family members have for successful long-term employment, and is a pretty unique department to have at a manufacturer and at an employer. So welcome, Chris. I'll hand it over to you to kind of dig a little deeper into Nehemiah's story for us before I join you to ask a few questions. And also a quick reminder to our audience, feel free to drop questions into the chat as well. We'll be able to get to those at the end of the session.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Very happy to be here, and anytime that we can speak about fair chance hiring, second chance hiring, we certainly take the opportunity because we feel we're called to do, what's right. My name is Chris Lonnie. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Nehemiah Manufacturing. As Pooja mentioned, we are a profit for a purpose consumer packaged good company. We were founded in 2009, located in Cincinnati, Ohio. Overall, we're a faith-based company. We're called Nehemiah for a reason. And what Nehemiah was a prophet in the Old Testament that God called back to build commerce within the walls of Jerusalem. So we are specifically located here in a underprivileged area of the city of Cincinnati, of which has a life expectancy on average around 63 years of age. If you go about 10 to 15 miles outside of where we're at now, the life expectancy increases to 76 years of age. So a significant difference. So what we try to do is our mission is pretty simple. We build brands, we create jobs, and we change lives. The building brands and the creating jobs are really comes from our manufacturing and our partnership with Procter & Gamble. We are currently the third largest licensee that Procter & Gamble has in the entire world. So we are proud to say that there would be no Nehemiah without the help of Procter & Gamble, and we're very grateful and appreciative of our partnership. So what do we do? And the changing lives is really where our sweet spot is. We truly believe that by changing one person, we're doing generational change. So our mission is we look for individuals that have had barriers for long-term employment. Those barriers could be felony and misdemeanor convictions. It could be a history of drug and alcohol abuse. It could be homeless. It could be mental illness. So what we do is we meet them where they're at. We build a culture, a caring culture. And our aha moment is our founder and CEO says quite a bit. All of us have been in the corporate world. We're very well versed on HR. We understand that classically HR is there to develop policies and procedures to really protect the organization, not necessarily always the employees. We're here at Nehemiah. We have 2 social workers on staff full-time in addition to HR. And that was really our aha moment. A lot of us thought in the very beginning that an individual frankly just needed a chance to be able to be, a returning citizen and to really be able to give back. Well, we quickly learned that it was more than just a job. We had to really tackle transportation. We had to tackle housing. We had to tackle a lot of these basic needs that frankly, a lot of us probably on this call take for granted every single day. So that was our aha moment of looking that it was more than a job and having a social service team that does assessments. So when we have an individual that has an opportunity to come down and work for us, they go through an assessment, which for lack of a better term is an interview on steroids. We look for, what our family members' hopes and dreams are. We necessarily don't care about one's past. And our CEO says it perfectly. Once you hit our door, you're a family member. We don't care about your past. What we care about is what your future is. So our social service teams meets them where they're at. And we like to refer to it as we're a hand up, not a hand out. And there's a big difference there because if you're a hand out, you in a way can enable, you can almost want it more than what that family member does. Whereas a hand up, you're going to run as fast as that family member wants to get to their hopes and dreams. So that's really what spawned Nehemiah in regards to the second chance hiring. And the one thing that we'll talk about quite a bit today is everybody understands the moral case. Everybody deserves a second chance. I am confident everybody on this phone call has made at least one mistake today that they don't want to plague them throughout their entire life. So with that, there's also a business case. We've calculated onboard somebody. It's around $3,500 to train somebody to onboard it. We have about 100 family members within our production facility. In an industry that we're seeing all-time highs in turnover, around 75 to 100%, the math is simple. So if you use the example of 100% turnover and $3,500 onboarding costs, that's a total amount of $350,000. Why invest in constantly training entry-level individuals, but just utilize that money to improve their lives, to increase the wages, to give services so individuals can get back onto their feet and really deliver on their hopes and dreams. So that's what we do. Our average turnover right now is 15%, which is incredible. We've been around since 2009. Our average tenure now is up to 7.5 years. So it really shows that the community that we're building, and we do that through 8 pillars of support. And this is something that we have constantly managed. We're constantly ever changing. And we've divided this in 2 separate ways. We've done basic needs, which is building community, affordable housing, transportation, and legal services. And then there's thrive versus survive. So there's spiritual wellness, financial wellness, health and wellness, and continued education. And we have a formula that we really love to show is a committed family member plus low turnover equals improved profitability and overall community impact for it. So we'll pay each one of these off and kind of go along with it, because the thing that you're going to hear also is the underlying theme. We're not experts. We partner with a number of social service agencies within the region, the city of Cincinnati, and we lean on them. We lean on them as a partner to help our family members. And we also invest in them on a very large percentage of our EBITDA on an annualized basis to really grow that partnership. So we go to the next slide. So building community. You probably have heard me refer to our family members. Here at Nehemiah, we do not have employees. We have family members. And if you think about that, when somebody says that somebody's a family member, you're ultimately on a different level than a traditional employee. You want to know about their significant other. You want to know about if they have any children. You want to know about what hopes and dreams they have. You want to be more invested in them. The underlying of our mission and what we do here in our ministry at Nehemiah is intentionality. And we want to be intentional with our family members to build that trust factor. If you don't have trust, this whole framework really collapses. So when we say we're going to do something, we certainly do. So how do we build community? Well, number one, we refer to everybody as a family member. We want to know their name. But we do certain things like we purchased over almost 300 backpacks this past August and gave it to all of our family members for their children to go back to school. Santa, Christmas, can't believe Christmas is right around the corner. Santa does an annual visit to Nehemiah, of which we will give over 100 gifts of value of $50 each to every family member's children within our facility. And they get their name called and they come up there, just really building that community, knowing that we are invested in them and we really appreciate everything that they do. So the next pillar is affordable housing. So affordable housing, we really went down this journey. We thought what we could do is we could combat this by purchasing a property. So in 2015, we purchased a 4-family unit about 2 miles away from where we're at now, thinking that we would have 5 or 6, and we charge a sub-market rate. And the premise of this is for our family members to be able to get back onto their feet, to live there for about 2 to 3 years, to save enough money, to get back into a regimen of having to pay for certain things to maintain a house. But we fully furnish it from a TV to the kitchen table to the bed. And then once they graduate, they're able to take all the linens and the mattress. But the one barrier that we found with this is not everybody always wanted to live near the individuals that they worked with. So this is where we partnered with different agencies here locally in Cincinnati to really get housing in a number of different ways. But this is a prime example of an initial pillar that we sought out with, that we had to constantly pivot along the way, because this is a living ministry that we're doing and we're constantly having to adapt to our family member needs. The next pillar is transportation. We've recently partnered with a non-for-profit here just south of Dayton in Ohio called Transformation Trails. And we're super excited about this partnership because they come down to our facility every Wednesday and they work on our family members' vehicles while they're at work. And they do things such as oil changes, tires, changing brakes, To an extent, actually, this past Wednesday, they were putting a new door on one of our family members' vehicles. So we're constantly looking at and constantly trying to, again, adapt to how we can give a betterment to our family members and really deploy a lot of different avenues to make their lives better each and every day. And the last section from the basic needs is legal services. And we have partnered with an attorney. We have her on retainer. Nehemiah pays 100% of all expenses. And it goes through such things as expungements, license issues, child support, parenting time, garnishments, negotiating bad debt for it. This individual has been amazing. We've partnered with her since 2017, and she has worked on over 80 cases for our family members to really, again, continue to clear those barriers, to create the generational change that we're doing. And that's what really drives us, is we're affecting one individual's life, one of our family members, but then it really has a whole network event through their family and the like. So once we kind of get the basic needs, now we're really in the thrive mode. We're really trying to kick it into gear to tackle those hopes and dreams. So we start with spiritual wellness. And how that looks is, again, I said we are a faith-based company. We're a faith-based organization. We're not Bible thumpers, but we certainly believe of a higher being and that we're called to do the right thing. So we partnered with a local ministry here, Block Ministries, and we have Bible study. And the big thing here, again, is we invest in our family members and in the organizations to help our family members. So our employees, our family members, are paid to go to this. So if they want to go to our Bible study that happens weekly, it's on the clock. Nehemiah will certainly pay them for this because we feel that this is another avenue to help an individual get through their hopes and dreams. And we've seen the payback associated with it and the camaraderie that goes along with it. The next pillar is financial wellness. So financial wellness, there's a number of different facets here. Everybody wants to know how to save money. Everybody wants to know how to really, be positioned appropriately for retirement. But not a lot of people know how to get there. Not a lot of individuals know how to budget accordingly and improving credit ratings and analyzing credit reports. So we have developed and partnered with a number of organizations, our banking relationship partner, PNC, to come in, and we leverage their financial wellness trainings in their organizational financial wellness initiative, where they come in and they help our family members put a budget together and then go for a goal. Is it a new car? Is it getting their own house? And this is where originally this process and this pillar was more for budgetary purposes and getting folks back up on their feet. And it morphed into a first-time home buyer program. I'm confident, like other cities here, like in Cincinnati, rent prices are going through the roof. We have family members that are paying rent for a one-bedroom apartment more than probably a lot of our mortgages for a multi-bedroom house. So we heard what our family members said. I'm tired of not really wasting money and allowing the building equity in a house that I'm never going to own. So we partnered with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and have gone through an empowerment assessment that our individuals, our family members, once they go through this, we will match up to $5,000 of a down payment that folks can use, towards building equity or closing costs or furnishing their new home. And we've had about 6 individuals graduate in that program, and we're super excited and continuing to really drive that. And then the last pillar that we founded on is continued education. Everybody wants to improve, but we do. We have health and wellness. I apologize. Health and wellness. This is probably the bread and butter of what we do, and it's all about peer addiction and recovery support. A lot of our family members that have come here have had some form of mental health that they've needed to go through a recovery support system. And with that, we have partnered with City Gospel, a very large not-for-profit here. But then the key takeaway for this slide is our family members that have been here for a number of time have created a 180-degree program. So this is a peer recovery program that our family members can go to and talk with each other that have been in their shoes. I am not a second chance individual. I am privileged and blessed not to be one, for it. But there are other folks, obviously, that are. And these individuals, they take more credit because they've walked in one's shoes. I can have empathy which I certainly do, but I've not walked in their shoes. So this group really can help do that. And then health and wellness, or continued education. I guess we got those little flipped up. Sorry about that. That's fine. We'll continue with continued education. Continued education, everybody wants to get better. And we've heard that. And we do this a little bit different than just really on-the-job training. We obviously do advancement training, but we do GEDs, we do higher education, we do computer classes. We try to really make sure that the individual is more well-rounded, and again, to really help better themselves. And then we have a tuition reimbursement. We currently have 4 individuals that are going through college to get a bachelor's degree, and we will reimburse that family member up to $5,250 a year. I think that might.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, Nehemiah is doing so much in this space, but I want to reiterate that it didn't happen overnight, right? Y'all have been doing this for a while. You've identified different gaps in community services that exist in your area and region that you have started filling with all of these initiatives that you mentioned. I do want to bring up that in 2020, Nehemiah became the first published case study of a for-profit company creating a business strategy out of second chance hiring. I know this was an important moment for second chance hiring, but also how companies actually think about corporate D&I efforts a little more broadly. Can you talk a little bit more about that moment for Nehemiah?
Yeah, I mean, that was a significant moment in our organization. It added a significant amount of validity to what we're doing. We opened up our books, our doors, every nook and cranny in our organization to Harvard. They had heard about us, but they were kind of a little leery associated with it. So we pulled everything back, showed them, allowed them to talk to our family members, and it added a significant amount of credibility for what we're doing here. And it shows that organizations can do the right thing and also, do very well in business at the same time.
I know that there's a Beacon of Hope Business Alliance. It's a former nonprofit that's now owned by Cincinnati Works, but that was started by Nehemiah's leadership and is an alliance of employers dedicated to second chance hiring. Can you share a little bit more about how Beacon actually mobilizes employers around this cause, supports them in implementation, and a little bit more about success factors that they follow? Yeah.
So back in 2015, we created the Beacon Hope Business Alliance. And what that was resembling is allowing folks to come into our facility and really mimic and learn what our policies and procedures are. And it started really gaining a lot of momentum. It got to the point where we had a large grocery chain come down. We had a large manufacturing company here in the city of Cincinnati come down, and we're very interested in implementing it in their situations. It got to the point where it got a little too big for us. So we did transition it to a not-for-profit called Cincinnati Works, and they've done a fantastic job for it. What they do is they really leverage other organizations within the city that are embracing fair chance hiring and share ideas. Because I believe, earlier it was discussed, well, somebody's doing this over here and they weren't really necessarily as good as on the background checks and the like. So they're sharing best practices and connecting organizations that maybe want to tip their toe into fair chance hiring and want to hear it from them and want to experience it for that. I would say the success factors are associated as placing one person, giving, starting small. If you have one person that can, in one organization that wants to really start embarking on this journey, that's a win, for it. And the retention is there. Our second chance individuals are by far our most loyal, hardest working individuals that you will know. And they're just amazing people. And, we're so thankful for them and really do it. But the Beacon of Hope, they also leverage the social service agencies here and really within the network.
I think the starting small factor is a really good one for our audience to take away from this conversation. I'm going to jump into the toolkit itself. Chris, thank you so much for sharing. And for the audience, we'll be back in a little bit with Chris for more questions as well. So I'd ask for Matt to come back on so that he and I can go a little deeper into our actual second chance hiring toolkit for local communities. So again, we're really thankful to our pilot companies and community partners who really led the charge on this work locally and let us interview them and really dig into what works and what doesn't work. The toolkit itself starts off with a rationale for second chance hiring. This will really help community partners and employers understand what it will take internally for employers to take this on and how community partners can truly support them. We really like to emphasize employer-led initiatives and also having employers collaborate with one another as much as possible on these types of initiatives. It truly helps local community partners to align limited resources to help multiple employers at the same time. And so we really want to make sure that that message comes through. And then the other thing we really like to emphasize, especially in this space, second chance hiring, is ensuring that employers really truly understand and get training on how to work with second chance individuals, how to properly recruit and retain them. And so there's so many resources available that we've linked throughout our toolkit as well. So the toolkit, once you get through the actual business case for second chance hiring, it's then divided into 5 different stages for program development, implementation, and sustainability. So the first stage is planning. The stage really focuses on setting the foundation for the second chance hiring program. It encourages you to identify your goals, map out your local support ecosystem, and define the parameters of success. The second stage is partner. In this stage, you engage with local partners identified in your ecosystem, including manufacturers. Using this industry sector partnership approach truly helps, as I said earlier, community partners maximize and align limited resources available to them. Third stage is equip. In this stage, community partners should help employers get smart about obtaining the necessary knowledge, as I mentioned earlier, and a foundation for a strong and successful second chance hiring program. This includes ensuring that employers are equipped with data and knowledge to make their business case internally and start changing some internal policies for a safer and more inclusive environment. The fourth stage is implement, where you're putting stage 3 into practice, essentially, getting the ecosystem to work for you, have the community partner and manufacturer kind of that referral system worked out, and then have necessary employee supports in place on the community partner side, but also on the manufacturer side. The 5th and final stage is sustain, in the spirit of manufacturing and continuous improvement. This is really where you can tweak the program, how it's set up, what's working, what's not working, engage additional employers that can join you on this journey, and really find champions in the community to help spread the word. And I'll hand it over to Matt to dig a little deeper into each stage for us.
Great, thanks, Pooja. And if we can skip 2 slides ahead. So just as we go through this, we wrote the toolkit, I think, with 2 audiences in mind, right? If you see yourself as a Carat Collective or a Nehemiah, and you're at the front end and want to engage more employers in your community and build a local ecosystem and sort of create that infrastructure, I think the toolkit has some real sort of resources and opportunities to do that. I think there's also a lot of employers who are at the very front end of this process and just learning and figuring out, what does this look like at my company and how do we think about this? So we wanted the toolkit to be applicable to both audiences. So the stages that Pooja mentioned can really take you through both a process of building an ecosystem locally, but also a process within your company to think about, how do we start and go through step by step to build toward being a second chance employer. So just to go through the stages very briefly, the first is really defining success and planning and understanding, what do we mean when we say second chance? What do we want to get out of being a second chance employer? Does that mean expanding our candidate pool? Does that mean giving back like Nehemiah and making sure that we sort of push retention and employee experience in a meaningful way? And I think for the planning stage, if you're an employer thinking about this, part of that is bringing together the right constellation of people. Right. So it's not just a talent acquisition strategy. It involves legal. It involves, PR and communications. It may involve CSR, community impact, or executive leadership. So starting with the right constellation of people to be aligned and moving in the same direction. We can move to the next one. The second piece really is about how to do this thoughtfully at the local level. So I think the main goal is to figure out sort of what do we need, in our company, what are our talent needs, what are the barriers, but then going to your local partners and thinking about who are there care collectives in my community? Are there organizations serving people coming back from the justice system, providing training, providing work readiness, and really starting to do that ecosystem assessment and understand, who is there in the criminal justice world and the reentry world serving this population, and how do I align that with what my workforce needs are and what skills and qualifications I may need in my job, and start to think about how to build toward those partnerships and reach out to those partners. One resource I think just went up in the chat, the MI has built a community partnership scorecard to really be able to assess what are the qualities you might look for as you're thinking about a partner to refer candidates and support candidates to you along the way. Go to the next one. So the third stage is really looking internally and figuring out what are the changes or modernization that we might need to make to our policies and practices to meet our second chance goals. So part of that is making the case and being able to use some of the rationale that Pooja mentioned in the toolkit to make sure that those leaders at the company who may have questions about this or may push back really understand why this is important from a talent acquisition perspective, from a community leadership perspective, and then going through and reviewing your current HR practices and understanding, are there barriers that exist within our hiring process for candidates with past convictions that we might want to look at and update to open up the doors a little bit more to people with past convictions. So that could be everything from your job posting and your application language to how you sort of run and do the interview process, all the way through background screening and kind of what comes back on a background check process and how that's read and considered. But I do think in each of these instances where we see employers sort of move towards second chance practices, it does take a bit of self-reflection on what's the current state of our HR practices and what might we need to update to be more welcoming to candidates with past convictions. We can move to the next one. So then we're moving to implementation. And so I think this is about starting to actually put into action some of the local partnerships that you might build with those organizations like Care Collective who are supporting and working with candidates with past convictions. Part of that is being able to advertise yourself to those folks. And so I think employers that can really develop the language on how do we present to those community partners the kinds of opportunities that we have, why manufacturing is a great industry for people who they're serving, and really having an honest conversation and honest language about that you're a second chance employer, but if you have specific jobs or specific qualifications, that those community partners can understand you as a company, understand your needs, and really vet and help select candidates that meet those needs. And then it's a process, and I think hopefully we'll have some time to get back with Liana and Chris. But I think one of the things we've learned is that when employers build partnerships with community-based organizations, it takes a lot of iteration to make sure that it's being done efficiently, that it's being done well, and that both parties are succeeding along the way. And so just building in that time with your partners to assess, to have open communication, feedback, and make sure that matching between candidates and between the job openings is working well. And then the last stage, as you move into, I think we heard a lot from Chris about what it means to build second chance into your culture. So again, I think companies that really adopt a second chance ethos are open to candidates with past convictions, but also are thinking about, how do we grow and expand these practices? If we're in multiple places and multiple jurisdictions, how do we build models that can expand company-wide? And then what are the other channels within our company that we might be able to consider this? So things like procurement, things like, working with, with either staffing agencies or other vendors. How do we align practices with those folks? Think about kind of our own culture and our own learning across employees. And then things like philanthropy and community involvement and volunteerism, just starting to go from an openness to conviction, employees with past convictions to a model where it's really kind of part of the DNA of the company. And I'll end by saying, engaging your local chambers, your local industry associations, industry partners. I think being able to kind of bring those conveners to the table to figure out how can we not just do this ourselves, but build an ecosystem and a model in our community where there are folks bringing together multiple businesses that want to engage in second chance, partners that can help support that work, and creating the kind of mature ecosystem that we've heard about in Chicago and Cincinnati. So with that, I'm going to pass back. We have a couple of minutes, I think, for questions. So Pooja, let me pass it back to you. Open that up.
Thank you, Matt. We do have a quick question that might be good for you, Matt, or Liana. Suggestions for one-stop point of contact for employers to efficiently navigate network of community providers, considering that each employer's needs, concerns, experiences may differ. And the same question for efficiently connecting employers open to second chance hiring with justice impacted individuals.
Liana, let me pass to you to go first.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this short. I think unfortunately, I hear the word efficient, and that is not always the case for all ecosystems. I think where we have seen employers have great success is where they have recognized this is a talent strategy and they're investing in solutions. So Chris, I heard you talk about investing in the community partners to make this work possible. So I think it does take some time going out there, getting to know the organizations in your community. There are some good links, I'm sure, that can be shared that are kind of directories of some of these organizations that can help you get that started. But to the point that was made earlier about a scorecard, that is so critical. If you think about any of your vendors or business partners, you want to do due diligence and understand, do our partners' resources match our needs? Particularly if you're earlier in your journey, if you are recruiting directly out of some of those systems and somebody doesn't have a network of support, or they're not connected to a community-based organization, they may not have all of their needs met. So just being very careful to consider who you're going to partner with and how they can best support you.
Thank you, Liana. I have one for you, Chris. And we're not going to get to all of the questions, but I think we'll be able to send kind of an FAQ based on the other questions that we've gotten when we follow up with the video of the recording. So there was a question about who pays for the legal services. Does Nehemiah pay a retainer for the attorney? Does the lawyer do it pro bono? Is there a grant that's received to pay the attorney? How does that work?
Yeah, so Nehemiah, we pay 100% of it. So that comes out of the proceeds and the profit from our manufacturing distribution. Now, there are certain things in certain cases that we certainly look at, and our attorney puts together a budget, and we have a conversation with the family member, but no, 100% paid by Nehemiah.
Awesome, thank you. How does an employer get connected with agencies that can help them then connect with second chance job seekers?
I think starting with your chamber is probably the easiest thing. They have the connections associated with it. I think the next big thing for somebody to embark on a second chance hiring platform is you need the top down. You need the CEO, the owner, the executives to truly buy off on it. HR is a great place to start, but a lot of times they're not the decision makers. So if you have somebody that really is going to lead the charge, top down is certainly the way to go. But I'd recommend starting with your local chamber to have the necessary connections for the social services. And then again, start small. Changing one person's life is incredibly meaningful, and it gives you that high to continue down that journey.
Thank you for that. I think we're pretty much at time, so I don't want to go over Like I said, we'll be sending this recording out to everyone. We'll also include some FAQs so that we can get to some of the other questions that were asked as well. We'll throw up a quick resource slide. Feel free to reach out to us for information or second chance resources. We also have other DE&I resources as well that we've developed at the MI to access and recruit and retain other untapped talent populations. We will actually have a couple more sessions for this toolkit deep dive. We plan to have one in December that's specifically for our state partner manufacturing associations and partner manufacturing trade associations. So please encourage any associations like that you're affiliated with to join us for that session so that we can help them also understand how to support their manufacturers. We'll also have one in January. That one will be specifically for workforce development boards. And so we also encourage all of you to share this information with your local workforce board so that we can also help them access the information and resources to support their regional manufacturers as well. I want to take this opportunity and thank our speakers for just sharing so many amazing things that you're doing in this space, and just thank you for everything that you do in this space. Thank you to Envoy for being such great partners for us, and also to Stand Together Trust for supporting our work. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day, and feel free to reach out to us at any time.